Welcome back to Harmonize Your Life, conversations on self-care for women of color with your host, Dr. Tony G. Alvarado. We'll be right back. Well, I'm glad to be back with you with another exciting episode of the Harmonize Your Life podcast. And I have with me one of my favorite guests, my sister in love, my soror, Dr. Anastasia Alvarado. Y'all welcome her back to the Harmonize Your Life podcast. Welcome back, Dr. Stacy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tony, for asking me to come back.
You know what they say.
Okay.
You know what they say. You know, when I go preach places, if I get asked back, I'm like, ooh, okay. You know, you can get asked once anytime, but if you get asked back, you must be saying something.
I must be saying something okay. So I appreciate the invitation to come back always.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Stacy. You know, we love you. We love you on the Harmonize Your Life podcast. You are one of our favorite guests to the podcast. You are part of the Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Retreat. I have adopted you as a part of the core faculty of the retreat. Because they always want to hear Dr. Stacy at the retreat. So I'm glad to have you on the podcast. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want us to kind of recap. We just came back from this year's retreat. We were in Asheville, North Carolina, and I want everybody to know we were safe. We were doing our COVID-19 guidelines, staying safe. Everybody wearing masks. We even taught through our masks. That's right. And we were socially distanced. The group size was at a very healthy size for the environment that we're in, and of course,
we all tested before we got there.
And we all took a COVID-19 test and reported our results before we all met up there in the Omni Hotel, the Omni Oak Park Inn there in Asheville, North Carolina, in Blue Ridge Mountains. Did an excellent job with their standards. I felt very safe. The staff, everybody, masks were mandatory throughout the property, everywhere we went, and the wait staff and the hospitality staff was very, very careful to make sure that the environment was safe for all of those that were on the property. And so we just got back from this year's retreat, Dr. Stacy, and I asked you to come on the podcast to kind of do a little recap of what we talked about at the retreat. And we're going to be talking today about protecting our peace, managing stress, and protecting our peace, self-care for stress, anxiety, and trauma. And so I am glad that you are with us today. And I just kind of want to talk a little bit about that whole idea of protecting our peace as relates to, because we've come through a very traumatic season.
We have. I mean, in so many various ways.
We are in a traumatic season. Let me say.
We are still in. This is
still in the pandemic.
2020, the year ended, doesn't mean that the season that we're in ended.
Yeah, because remember what's our line? What's our line now?
We are still in December. Let me see. We should be on December 46, December 46, 2020. So it's just extended. We're still in the same season.
We are in December. What are we in now? What's today? The 16th?
16th. So, yeah,
so
that's
we got this little joke going, y'all, that it feels like 2020 just moved right into 2021. And so it's not January, whatever, it's December, whatever, 2020, because it feels like we're still there. But yeah, so let's talk about this idea. You talked to us about the different reasons why we need to protect our peace. You talked about the global pandemic, the social and economic, social unrest, the racial pandemic that we're in, the election overload, loss, grief, financial stress. These were some of the main reasons you gave. I'm looking at our notes from last week that you gave us as to why we have to protect our peace in this environment.
Absolutely. So, interestingly enough, I got asked to do another video related to mental health right after the pandemic, and right after the retreat, or I should say, right after the retreat, and doing the protecting my peace session for the retreat. And one of the things I was looking up was the state of mental health in America. So, Mental Health America, which is an organization, does screens just to see kind of where we are. And the reality is that mental health is on the rise. It is absolutely on the rise in 2020. And so we have had increases in the CDC, I believe, also did some screens as well. We've had increases in depression, increases in anxiety, increases in serious suicidal thoughts, particularly in young adults and our teenagers and up to our young adults. And a lot of the screeners that are going out there, the information returning to us is that young adults, minorities, essential workers, which a lot of times are minorities and people of color, and unpaid caregivers are showing disproportionately to have worse mental health outcomes, increased substance use, and elevated suicidal thoughts. So if that isn't enough to tell us that our peace has certainly taken some hits this year, that in and of itself, just looking at COVID, they were just looking at people's responses as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, our finances and economic downturn for many certainly impacts how I feel mentally and emotionally. And, I don't have a job. So how am I going to sustain myself and my family financially, how that impacts us? And of course, just considering the fact that we're dealing still with political unrest, an insurrection that just happened in our nation's capital, how that has impacted or how we feel emotionally as people of color seeing what we saw in our nation's capital.
Yeah. Very stressful.
It's been very stressful. Black Lives Matter movement, that hasn't gone away, because the next time that we see, an unarmed Black woman, an unarmed Black man getting murdered in the street, in their home, it impacts us. And it doesn't go away. So we need to, because it doesn't go away.
And we're seeing it in real time.
Right. We're seeing it
watching this insurrection. I mean, it was unbelievable. It looked like something out of a television show or a movie. It was crazy.
It was absolutely mind-blowing. And you're trying to grapple with all of these different things. And it's like, how do I grapple with this and still maintain any sense of peace? On top of, and this is, we're just talking, this is on a broad spectrum stuff, but then, we are still having to get through day-to-day stuff that we deal with, right? So we're talking on a broad spectrum, this is what we had to deal with, but even on a microscopic level, what are people dealing with in their homes, in their families, in their communities, in their communities of faith? What are we grappling with from day to day on top of all of this? So it's just layers upon layers upon layers that get built up. And a lot of times we don't even recognize or think about it. We just, push it aside and we keep moving. We mentalize it and we keep moving. But if we don't deal with it, we're going to eventually, it's going to come out. You can't put something away in the closet and act like it's never going to come back. That unrecognized trauma, that unrecognized, those feelings, those thoughts, those emotions, it's so important to recognize those. And that's one of the things that we talked about at the retreat, why it's so important that we not just talk about the event, but talk about the emotions that we feel because of how those things impact us and how they can impact our thoughts, impact our behaviors, impact our relationships. And so why it's so important that we recognize the event and the emotions tied to it.
Right. And that was one of the key things we talked about at the retreat. In your session, you helped us get in touch with our feelings. So it was important. You said in order for us to protect our peace, we had to know, we had to be able to name what we were actually feeling.
Right.
And that was so cathartic for me. That was so cathartic for me to be able to get in touch with my feelings and be able to say how I feel. You gave us a feeling wheel, and we talked about those different feelings. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think many times we limit ourselves by saying one or two things like I'm angry or I'm sad, but we don't expand upon that as to, why we're feeling angry about something. So yeah, I was angry when I saw what was happening as far as that insurrection on the Capitol, but part of that has to do with frustration of being a Black woman and knowing that if anyone out there looked like my husband or looked like my nieces and nephews or my father, that they would not have been treated in the same way. There's a underlying sense of frustration or underlying sense of irritation. There's an underlying sense of sometimes anxiety that comes with those feelings of anger that we have. So it was getting us to expand our vocabulary, expand our ability to think outside of just the one feeling or emotion and tap into something greater, and to actually be okay and honest with ourselves that I can feel more than one thing at a time as well. So I can be, I can have a feeling of, I'm going through a divorce, so I'm sad, I'm angry at this person. But maybe I also have a sense of peace in that I recognize that this particular relationship is coming to its end. And it's okay for me to also have that feeling as well. And so it doesn't mean that just because I have this mix of emotions that any of them are wrong. It's how I feel. So I can be okay with how I feel.
Yeah, and giving yourself permission to feel how you feel.
Exactly.
Naming that and giving yourself permission. And I like the way you said that we can have kind of like feelings that could be almost polar opposites, but feelings that are in tension with one another, but yet we can live in that tension.
Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So you said we should look for warning signs. I'm going over some of the things you said last week. You told us to look for warning signs like pain, indigestion, dizziness, insomnia. What were some of the other? Can you talk about some of those warning signs?
Absolutely. So pain in particular. So we talk about somatic, so that means physical symptoms related to my mental and emotional health or well-being. And pain is one of those indicators that could tell us that something's not right here. Chronic headaches, chronic back and shoulder pain. Jaw pain is an example I give people because they don't recognize that maybe they grit their teeth or they may grind their teeth when they're feeling overwhelmed, feeling anxious, when they're having intense stress responses. So I tell people to pay attention to pain. Indigestion was a one that I spent a lot of time with. And because talking about the bowel and digestion and our digestive system, recognize that or just don't know that the bowels and the brain are very closely connected. That they call the bowel system the second brain because we have over 100,000 neurons in our digestive system. It's called the enteric nervous system. And so when we talk about like different metaphors, like, that was gut wrenching, or I had butterflies in my stomach, like that is an actual thing that's happening because of how the nervous system operates and communicates directly with the brain and the peripheral nervous system and the like. So when you are under stress or when you are experiencing increased anxiety, it is very common for people to experience nausea, to experience problems with constipation or diarrhea, stomach pain, so all of those things are very common with, when I'm feeling a whole bunch of emotional, I guess, unrest, so to speak. We also have a suppression of our immune system. So there is something at the cellular level that happens, and there are certain hormones and stress hormones that get emitted when we're under stress, and those can increase infection because they decrease white blood cells. Okay, so our white blood cells are what is helping fight infection, and these increased stress hormones over time can cause those other areas in the body to decrease. And so now I can't fight infection. I can't fight inflammation as well as I once could. And so we don't want our body to be under sustained stress for too long. So, a lot of people try to separate for some reason, the brain and mental health from what's going on with the rest of the body.
But it's all connected.
Yeah. And it's all connected. It's all very much connected. It's why I remind people, I'm like, look, I'm still a medical doctor. I did go to I went to a whole medical school. I understand the whole body. The whole body is involved with your mental health, believe it or not.
Okay.
So,
wow. You hear that? Your whole body is involved with your mental health. Yes.
The whole body.
The whole body. Yes.
So self-care and thinking about your mental health self-care, we can't leave the physical body out of it.
Wow.
Yeah. We can't disconnect the two.
So we can't compartmentalize our lives. This is my mental health. This is my physical health. This is my spiritual health. This is my financial health. It's all connected.
It's all connected.
My occupational health, my social health, my social well-being, all of that is connected.
It is all connected, which is why when people come to our offices and they're getting therapy, or we're talking about medications or the like, and we're asking certain questions. They're like, well, why do you need to know that? And I'm like, because all of those things are connected. We need to know what your social support system is like, because people who have social support systems it's a protective factor for depression.
Wow.
It's a protective factor for suicide if you have a community. Right?
So part of protecting my peace is having a community.
That's part of it. That is absolutely part of it.
Wow.
So, everything is connected. And so, we get in depth. We dig, I tell people all the time that it's my job to be nosy. It's okay. You can open up and be vulnerable in here, because whatever you share with me, it's not going anywhere else. I may dialogue with your therapist, but that's because we're working together as a team to support, that individual. But we want to help you build up your protection. You're protecting that peace. We want you to be able to build that up so that when life happens, because it is going to happen, that you have that fortress. You've got some things that are there to protect you. You've built it up. And so now I've built up my physical health, and I've built up my spiritual health, or I built up my mental health. And so those things, now I've got that protection surrounding me. So when life does happen, I might take some hits, but I'm able to withstand it. Crumble. The wall isn't going to completely fall down. Right?
Wow, Stacey, this is so good. This is so good. So you gave us some remedies, and I want you to talk a little bit about those. You talked about so you talked about looking for warning signs, acknowledging our feelings, paying attention and listening to our gut, what our gut is telling us. all of those things. And then you gave us some things. You called it strengthen and empower her. I love that term, strengthen and empower her. And the first thing you talked about there was creating a safe space.
Yes.
Say more.
So we are very busy people. Many of us are very involved in a lot of activities, even if it's virtual. And I've heard a lot of people.
This virtual world is busier than what we were before COVID.
Right. Because people, I don't know if it's because we're not driving everywhere, that the expectation is like, oh, well, then you're fine. You can just log on here or call into this meeting. But people find themselves, it's demand, and it's hard to separate and distance yourself from what is working versus what is some solitude and some time to reconnect with you and yourself. And because we're constantly working, or we're constantly on a Zoom chat, or we're constantly on a teleconference, or logging into social media. And so I believe that we need to protect our minds in the same way that we talk about protecting Black lives. We should talk about protecting Black minds, protecting our minds and our space, so that we do not become utterly exhausted from extending ourselves into too many spaces and too many places. And so, part of that creating a safe space is recognizing that I'm going to have to set boundaries, even if it's uncomfortable with individuals. I got to set boundaries for myself with social media, or boundaries for myself with news.
Like, out here all the time and everything and everybody, exactly.
I've got to disconnect. So if I've watched enough CNN, I've watched enough MSNBC for today. It's enough.
And it's the same thing over and over anyway. Same thing, different day.
It's not breaking news anymore, guys. It's not breaking news on there 5 times. It's the same breaking news. It's not breaking anymore. Why do y'all keep putting breaking news? It's not. That thing has been breaking for the last 3 hours or last.
It's not. It's old news. It's not breaking news.
It's old news. So it's why, kind of reflecting back to knowing your emotions and being able to acknowledge them in creating that safe space, you need to know, what people may be creating some toxic environments for you. Like, look, I feel more negative. I feel certain negative emotions when I'm around this person all the time. Why is that? And maybe I need to create some space and some boundaries, and some, from that individual. One of the things that I found a quote that I shared with the women at the retreat as it relates to that safe space and setting boundaries, which the quote was, boundaries are the way that I am able to love you and me.
I remember that quote. Yeah. Boundaries is my way of loving you and me.
Right.
At the same time.
Right. So I'm showing myself love by setting boundaries with you. Right? I still love you from a distance. It's okay. But we might need to do that and to recognize that and remove those people. These individuals may have played a certain role in your life at one point, but maybe now it's not such a healthy relationship anymore. Okay. They're more draining than they are, adding to that relationship. So looking at just where that relationship has gone now, and do I still need the same level of relationship? It doesn't mean that we disconnect completely, but maybe the level of relationship I have with you and my availability to you is not the same as it once was. Things have changed. And that's okay.
And that's okay. That's okay. And you know what else I'm learning, you have to get people, I think, to be healthy, you have to know how to do that with people. And then also you have to know how to allow people to do that with you. You know, you got to know it's okay if people's lives change, your commitment level may have to change based on what's going on. And it's okay. It's healthy and it's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is okay. You know, and I found the exact quote. So I wrote it down. So boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. So that was the quote.
Boundaries are the distance in which I can love you and me at the same time. Yep. And that's a part of protecting our peace. Wow, wow, wow. Wow. Yep. Wow. So one of the things I learned a new term in our conversation with you last week at the retreat, when you talked about self-grace.
Yes.
And you said that was something that your therapist, even though you're a mental health professional, you have a therapist as well. Absolutely. And, you know, I advocate for therapy. I believe all of us need therapy, and I myself have a therapist and believe in therapy. And so I appreciate the fact that even you as a mental health professional, that you yourself have a therapist. Okay. And you talked about having a therapist, not just for you, but even you said even your marriage, and then you have therapy for yourself. So you talked about that, but you said you learned a term with your therapist about self-grace. And I want you to talk a little bit about that and that whole, how does that relate to protecting our peace and self-care and trauma and stress and anxiety?
So I think women in particular have the tendency to be more forgiving and kinder and gentler with their girlfriends than they are with themselves. So we are great friends to other people, or great mothers, or great caregivers to other people. And we are always find ourselves last on our own list. And so we are not in that same vein with ourselves. So we don't give ourselves grace if we, have a misstep, or forgive ourselves for not being able to do everything, which we're not going to be able to do.
Exactly.
Or to say it's okay that I didn't get everything on my list done. It will be there tomorrow. So, we are much more accommodating with other people and giving them grace.
Yeah.
God gives us grace, and He's such a loving and forgiving God, but we're still carrying stuff that He's already forgiven us for, that He's already let go, but we still carrying the weight of those of the world and everything else with us. Like, I should have done this way. Why didn't I say this? Or, I didn't ever finish that degree. I didn't do this. How did I let that marriage, dissolve like that? And those are all things that we're not giving ourselves grace.
Yeah.
We're not, loving on ourselves in the way that it's okay to say yes to you, to say yes to taking breaks, to say yes to making mistakes, to say yes for asking for help, to say yes to treating yourself.
Yeah. Right? Yeah.
Yes to you, because I know in previous podcasts I might have said something about the power of no, and it's okay to say no, but it's also okay to say yes
to you. Yeah.
That's really what self-grace is about, and saying, hey, it's okay to say yes to me. It's okay to say that's fine. It's okay. It's okay.
And you know what I really liked about that, because sometimes we can be our own worst critic. Yeah. And hard on ourselves if we don't do something that we think we should have done a certain way. And I think it's okay to say, you know what, I did my best and that's all I got.
Right.
This is the best I have. And it might not have blessed everybody, but it blessed somebody. And if it didn't bless anybody, it blessed me. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that whole self-grace is something, because I think if we can give grace to ourselves, then we can learn how to give grace to others. And because sometimes reason we can't give grace to others is because we're so rigid, we're so hard, and and those kind of things, and that doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good. And so, I mean, can you imagine that, you've got all of these things, like I said, battering at your defenses, right, from the outside. So we're building up this wall to protect our peace. And you got all of the things that happen with life battering us from the outside. So self-grace is giving you that thing that says, don't batter yourself from the inside, because you're breaking down your own walls.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So why are you beating yourself up from the inside? You're going to break down your own walls.
Wow.
You don't even need life to do it for you. You're creating cracks and crevices in your own life. When to beat yourself up.
I think the scripture that comes to mind here when you're talking about that is the Proverbs 14 that talks about a wise woman builds her house, but a foolish woman tears it down with her own hands. And not, I think about that in terms of building myself up, and caring for myself and all those things. Is foolish for me to tear myself down. Right. And we do that in so many ways because we got so many messages coming from culture, from society, from what other people have, expectations other people have of us, what other people want for us, the dreams and visions that they have for our lives. And we've never really consulted God or looked at what we really want. We've not even gotten in touch with what we really want. So then we find ourselves just on almost like on this treadmill of trying to catch up with ourselves, outdo ourselves, all this, and never feeling like we amount or that we're worth something, or that we have reached a point where we can be satisfied with where we are, what we've done, how we look. It's never, I'm always on my way there. But when do you get there?
Right. Like when do you sit there and value who you are? Just you. Just you.
Yeah.
That's who God has made you to be. Just you. Just everything that you already had, he's already deposited in you. So you didn't make mistakes. So just you.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like to me, part of this protecting our peace, you said you talked about stress, you talked about anxiety and trauma. Can you just unpack trauma just a little bit more for us? In what ways would you say we have experienced trauma that we may not even know we've experienced?
So just systemically, racism is traumatic. Microaggressions are when there are small things that you might encounter as a person of color during the day. Like, for an example, if you were in the pulpit and as a female, another male pastor comes in and asks, "Why are you there?"
Yeah.
Right? That's a microaggression against you as a female pastor, and that it's kind of belittling who you are and everything that you have accomplished by saying, "Well, she's a woman, so why is she sitting in this pulpit?"
Like the article, like the ne'er-do-well that want to say, why is Dr. Jill Biden using doctor if she's not a medical doctor? That
is a microaggression against women, right?
Yeah.
But it's small. Microaggressions can be small, little, minute things, but they are when we're dealing with sexism or dealing with racism, and you're constantly battered by those things day in and day out, and you just automatically, just learn how to roll with the punches, so to speak, or you just dealt with or saw what happened with Breonna Taylor, and you're still turning that over in your mind. But then the next day you're like, I've got to go sit in this meeting, and there are people from all different walks of life, and I just got to sit here and be quiet about it, even though I just have seen a young woman who could have been my family member. I know she got murdered in her home, and I am traumatized by that thought that it could be one of mine. And I don't get to do or say anything about it. I just have to just have to keep going. So racism of itself and what we deal with every day is something that is traumatic that we just don't even talk about or discuss. thinking about pandemic cases, because they're not cases, they're people, right? And how it's touched, but we keep saying cases and numbers, but the reality is we've lost hundreds of thousands of Americans. And so that is traumatic.
I saw an article yesterday that said what we have experienced with this global pandemic and the number of deaths, it's like, they said it's like 10 or like living with 10 airplanes falling out of the sky every day.
Right.
It just imagine if, and you know how traumatic it is when we hear one plane crash, even if it could be a year from now, you know what I'm saying? But to hear of a plane being falling out the sky, it's traumatic. It makes you fearful of flying again, all those kind of things. And and the article that I read said, what we've experienced in the number of deaths with COVID-19 is tantamount to 10 airplanes falling out the sky a day. That's unfathomable.
And you think about those who are healthcare workers and having to see it, imagine coming out of medical school. I could not imagine coming out of medical school and, going into specializing in whatever area of medicine I was going to practice. And all I'm doing is taking care of maybe COVID patients primarily at first, or all I'm doing is having to track, or call family members to tell them that their loved one has died because they can't come to the hospital, can't come. So I have to call you over the phone. And how traumatic is that for a family member? How traumatic is it for those who've lost family members and they don't get to be able to go to a funeral service and celebrate life in the way that we've celebrated life? These are all things that are traumatic when we have stuff just taken from us in that way.
Wow. Whew, let me tell you,
it's a lot to impact.
It's a lot of impact, and but there's hope. You talk to us about nourishing our soul, nourishing our body, nourishing our spirit. And these are the things. This is why it's so needed, you all. We are in an environment, toxic environments. We're in an environment where trauma is almost so normalized that we don't even know that we're experiencing it. We don't even know that we're walking around in fear, or that we're angry, or we got, we're stressed out because we're worried about, our children, the conversation we're having with our sons, now, we're telling our kids, be careful while you're out. You're driving, be careful. It's just so much. You don't know where the violence is going to pop up. You don't know where the racism is going to show up. You don't know you don't know if you're going to go out and catch COVID-19. It's so traumatic. And so in this season that we're in, we've got to be very diligent to protect our peace. We got to operate and we got to practice. I cannot stress it enough. Practice self-care so that we can protect our peace from stress, anxiety, and trauma. Wow.
I ended the session. I told the ladies, they knew from previous sessions I had and workshops I had done for the retreats that I love a good acronym. So I had ended the session with a good acronym, which was—
Give us that acronym. We're going to wrap up here with your acronym.
Yes, which is breathe, right?
Breathe.
So COVID-19, we talk about breath, we talk about racism, and I can't breathe. So our acronym was based on the word breathe. So the first B was about actually taking your breaths throughout the day, learning how to just stop and take a moment to breathe and take some of your breaths, because your breaths impact your state of mind, right? R was rest. So, make sure that you take some breaks. Wait
a minute, breathe. So B is for breathing, taking breaths throughout the day and practicing. I've been practicing my deep breathing. I really have, because I'm finding that I need it to center me. All right. And R is for?
Rest. So R is for the rest part. So rest. So that means taking breaks. So you're recharging. So rest so that you can recharge. Okay. E is for exercise. Well, that's right up your alley. So we
yeah,
need to
y'all know I am exercise.
physical activity. It's all connected, remember, mentally and physically. So and one great way to do get that exercise is yoga, because you can learn how to control your breathing and get your physical activity on. Right?
Yeah.
The A was for acquire wisdom. So listen to essays or sermons or podcasts.
Yes,
right?
like this one.
That you can learn from other people about things to help with protecting yourself overall and keeping up with your overall health. T was for therapy. I told everyone that's pretty much self-explanatory. Go find yourself a therapist. If anyone ever asks me why I have a therapist, I look at them like, why don't you? It makes sense to have one. Yeah, I can't do therapy on myself, and I need an outlet too.
Exactly.
H stood for helping yourself first and then others. So helping yourself by asking for help if you need it. Okay. And helping others is just, we know that being able to be generous and giving back to others makes us feel good. So when we see other people in need, you know, if your church or your sorority or another community group that you're involved in, doing community service activities, it's good to partake in that. It makes us feel good. So help yourself first and then help others. And the E is engage in mindfulness. So mindfulness and meditation. So, you know, finding meditation apps. Or
what's a good meditation app while we were at the retreat?
It's called Insight.
Insight.
INSIGHT. Insight Timer. Timer.
Timer.
I recommend it to all of my patients who come in who ask me about meditation. If you have never done meditation before, I don't know what this looks like. I don't know what to do. It is a wonderful app because they have different little sections within the app itself, where if you're a beginner, you can start there. If you are more high level, you can go there. They have meditations from as short as 60 seconds. So you have 60 seconds in your day to meditate. Or if you need something a little longer, you want something a little longer, they go up to about an hour and a half. There are apps, there are meditations in there to help with sleep, specifically to help with anxiety, specifically to help with depression. So it varies based on what you're looking for, what you want at the time. It's a wonderful application to use. I use it myself. I don't usually recommend anything that I would not do or I don't do myself. So it's a wonderful app. So breathe, rest, exercise, acquire wisdom, therapy, help yourself first and then others, and engage in mindfulness. So breathe, and we will all get through this together.
Thank you, Stacey. Well, y'all see why I bring her back. You see why I ask her to come. She is not only a gift to our family, but she is a gift to the body of Christ and the world in the work that she does. She's a gift to our sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She's always speaking on panels and sharing information. Dr. Stacey, where can we find you if they want to find you? I know your principal work is at Viewpoint Health, so put that on there. I know on Facebook they can look you up at Anastasia Brown Alvarado. Tell me where they can find you on IG. I want to be able to have them find you on IG. Tell me where.
I believe it's just Anastasia.Alvarado on IG.
Anastasia. Did I spell that right? Anastasia.Alvarado.
Alvarado is Gmail. Is the Instagram, is the IG. Okay. And I'm not on Twitter. I stay away from the digital world. That is a boundary I put on myself.
That's fine. So that's it right there. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. You can look her up on IG at Anastasia.Alvarado. She's just, if you want to invite her to sit on one of your panels or to to talk to your congregation or your women's group about self-care, I'm telling you, she is a wealth of knowledge and she is a blessing to any community and group that she shares valuable information with. We have been talking today about protecting our peace, self-care for stress, anxiety, and trauma. And our guest today has been none other than Dr. Anastasia Alvarado. And I'm so glad that she is a part of the Harmonize Your Life Conversations on Self-Care podcast. She's been a regular guest. I think this is maybe her third time appearing on the podcast. She's been a regular part of our retreat that we do every year in January, our self-care retreat. I want you to know you can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, on Spotify. You can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at Dr. Tony G. Alvarado. You can listen to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, or you can watch it on YouTube and you can find us there. You can also go to my website at drtonyalvarado.com and look us up. Ladies, I want you to join the Harmonize Your Life Self-Care Network. If you're not a member of this network, you need to be a part of this network. You heard Dr. Stacy say the part of our setting boundaries and protecting our peace is when we have a community that we are a part of. And we have started a self-care movement for women of color, Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Network. It is a group of women like myself, like-minded women like Dr. Anastasia, and we are there sharing information, giving information, bringing speakers and women, professionals in their field, and even just women having common conversation about self-care. We are caring for ourselves and for our sisters in the Harmonize Your Life Self-Care Network. So you can go to my website at drtonyalvarado.com and you can sign up for the Self-Care Network there. Thank you again, Dr. Stacy, for being our guest. We love you on this platform. You are a blessing to me personally and to our podcast community. Thank you again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, that's it. We'll see you all next week on the Harmonize Your Life Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color podcast with your host, Dr. Tony Alvarado. Hi, this is Dr. Tony Alvarado. I am so delighted about bringing the Harmonize Your Life podcast to you. Would you do me a favor? If you are enjoying this podcast, would you email me at hello@drtonyalvarado.com? I want to hear from you. I want your feedback. I want to know if there are any other topics that you are interested in as it relates to wellness, self-care, nutrition, or just overall bringing harmony into your life. Email me, contact me at hello@drtonyalvarado.com.